Hello, welcome again to Backyard Catch. This is your host, Nick Roby, and I'm here with my good friend, Mr. Barrett Black. How's it going?
There.
Hello. Hey. Thanks for being on. I'm glad we got to do this.
Yeah, man. Glad to be here with you.
Yeah. So that would be fun to have Barrett on. He and I live here in Greenville together and have enjoyed getting to know each other more. And Barrett is also a huge college football fan, and especially with the season starting to ramp up, we wanted to talk all things college football. But what's also fun is, as you may have heard before, I'm a huge Clemson fan. Barrett is a huge Alabama fan.
Roll Tide.
So the fact that we can be even in the same room is a feat among itself.
For sure.
But yeah, I want to have Barrett on. So Barrett, before we get into some college football things, I just wanted to give you the opportunity. So what has kind of drawn you to sports, like growing up? Like, what are some things you loved about it? Teams you grew up rooting for? Just what made you excited about wanting to be in sports?
Yeah, man. Well, I don't know. Let's see. I think that in general, being from Alabama, I grew up in north central Alabama. Obviously, when I was growing up, all you hear about around was Bear Bryant. Everything is Bear Bryant and, really the glory days of the Crimson Tide. And when I was 5, we won the national championship with Gene Stallings in 1992.
Right.
So obviously that was just like a revitalization. I mean, before that, the last one we had won was 1979, and then the Bear had died in the early 80s. I was born in 87, and so there was still kind of that living in the Bear Bryant days. Then Gene Stallings comes in, brings us to a national championship. And it was just like all you ever heard about Alabama football. My parents were dressing me in the little kit you buy that has the helmet and everything. It's like the little football kit. So had one of those.
How many of the Bear Bryant hats did you see growing up?
Honestly, the Bear Bryant hats, they weren't like a big thing.
It wasn't a thing until later. Okay.
The early 2000s is kind of when that whole houndstooth thing came in, and everybody really started wearing that and commercializing it everywhere, But before that, you would see them, but it was a rarity. It was more like you would see them in the Bear Bryant Museum, and you knew that was related to Bear Bryant, but you didn't know people around that had houndstooth hats.
That's so interesting. It's like the longer it's been, the nostalgia is like built it up. Yeah.
Exactly. And eventually, even when I was in colleges, when they put up the statues of all the coaches that had won national championships at the university, and then it was just like ratcheted up a little bit more with that. Oh, look at this nostalgia and all these winning coaches and everything. So yeah, started playing football as soon as my mom would let me in the 3rd grade. And for me, it was just about going out and having fun with my friends, And so really my world was just like my friends and our sports. I played baseball, basketball, and football. And then if I got to go to a college football game, then that was just like a whole nother level. I mean, we didn't have tons of time or money, or my parents didn't have tons of time or money, so I didn't get to go to a lot of games. But I still remember my first Alabama football game. We played Southern Miss at Legion Field, which is in Birmingham, Alabama. And at that time we would play one football game a season at Legion Field, one home game.
Okay.
And Tyler Watts was our quarterback. And this was like maybe year 2000. And I think it was a pretty rough game. We got beat 21-7, I believe was the final score, by Southern Miss. Can you
Golden Eagles?
Yeah, can you believe that? We're getting beat by Southern Miss. That would be unheard of these days with Alabama. But that was pretty normal for that time frame. I mean, we would have good years. Like 1999 was an amazing year with Mike DeBose as coach. But then you would just randomly lose to Southern Miss or Louisiana Lafayette or something like that, So it wasn't that big of a shock at that time, but heartbreaking nonetheless. For a 13-year-old.
That's a tough first game.
It is.
That's a tough first game.
It is. Oh man, I try not to remember too much about it.
Just block out those.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, so went to college at Alabama, and then my love for Alabama football even grew. So my first year, Shula was the coach when I started there, Mike Shula, that is. And first year we had an awesome year, 10-2 season. Kind of underachieved there at the end with losses to LSU and Auburn to end the season. That seemed kind of the way that things happened. We lost again to Auburn in 2006 and 2007. So by that time, it felt like we were losing to Auburn every year. We lost to them 6 or 7 times in a row.
That was in the stretch where in the BCS where Auburn like went undefeated, but they didn't make the national championship
Correct.
game.
Yeah,
that was in that
2004.
Stretch. 2004. Yeah. I remember that.
They were pretty upset about that. So, yeah, that was when we were losing to Auburn every year. But I was still so excited about Alabama football. It was just so much fun. I mean, game day came one time in 2007, which for us, that was a big deal at the time because we weren't having a great season. Yeah. In 2006, we didn't have a great season. But 2007, that was Saban's first year. Georgia came to town. They had Matt Stafford. It was a pretty big deal. And game day came. And, it was just like loving everything about football at that time and the fall and everything. And then 2008, 2009 kind of kicked off the dynasty, as you might say. And since then, it's just been like, wow, we're on the high side of Alabama football in my lifetime.
Right. I mean, just thinking about from our two fans, I mean, like Clemson's is similar. I mean, obviously Alabama has had more history with success, but Clemson's similarly, like they won in 81.
Sure.
But like had been good, but there was a stretch in the 90s when they weren't as good. And like in the 2000s, it was a stretch of like, man, going on the road at Boston College, trying to beat Matt Ryan at Boston College, going to Maryland. They were like the road game. We're like, okay, we're going to beat some big team, and then we're going to lose to Maryland on the road.
Yeah.
And we'll be 7-5.
For sure.
But now, now we've won 2 of the past 3, which is really cool. But to think about like the transition of what the national perception is, or what it's, you just wouldn't get used to. Like I still remember vividly getting beat by West Virginia in the Orange Bowl.
Oh yeah. I remember watching that game.
Give up 70 points, and just thinking like, man, we can never get over the hump.
Yeah.
And so it's so cool to see now, but just even just thinking about in our lifetimes, it's just our fandom of like not all these like fans get to see the transition of a team to like get to win and be on top for this long too.
Yeah.
So
you want to know something really ironic? So as my fandom was being shaped throughout my before I was a teenager and whatnot, I loved Alabama. They were like always in my life, because of my family and stuff. But I also was a huge fan of Florida State, who was awesome at that time. Remember, and Bobby Bowden, he's from he has a history in Alabama, and I loved everything about Florida State at that time. I think it started because I got a football card of work done when early 90s, and I was just like, oh man, work done is so awesome, and started following Florida State a little bit. So I had a little bit of some ACC love back at that time.
There you go. I mean, it's all connected.
And then randomly, I found a Clemson hat on the side of the road in Alabama, in my small town of Blunsville, Alabama. Somebody had lost a Clemson hat on the side of the road, and I thought it was a pretty cool looking hat. It's some pretty cool colors, orange and purplish. I think it was more bluish at that time.
It used to be blue.
Yeah, so orange and blue hat. I thought it was pretty cool. We took it back to the house, got it cleaned up, and I found a picture the other day of me wearing a Clemson hat as like an 11-year-old.
That's amazing.
How ironic, that I didn't even know where Clemson was at that time.
Yeah, I mean,
to be honest, when we played Clemson in 2008 in Atlanta, in the Chick-fil-A kickoff, I went to that game, and I think that it wasn't until we played y'all in that game that I had ever thought about where Clemson actually is. I didn't know before then.
Right, because most schools, it makes sense. Like Alabama's in Alabama,
of course.
And even. I mean, I took a while for me to know where Auburn was, too.
Of course, just the same way with Auburn.
Because if it's not in the name, then you don't think about it.
Yeah, like Vanderbilt. I mean, if you don't know Vanderbilt's in Tennessee, maybe people wouldn't know where it is.
Right,
I don't know.
Right. I mean, so it's interesting. Yeah, it's crazy how much the two go together, because obviously, like, Dabo Swinney went to Alabama, played under Gene Stallings, was a coach there first, then went to Clemson. Fun fact, too, is I also, when I was applying for colleges, the 3 schools that I only applied to a couple schools. The 3 schools I applied to is I went to Clemson, and then Alabama and Auburn.
Wow.
Were the 3.
Wow.
And I was picking between. If I'm being honest, I probably would have gone to Auburn if I didn't go. Of course, yeah. Just because it was the feel of the school was more of what I was looking for.
Yeah.
But it was just interesting. Like, those are the three that I was picking between.
Yeah, and the ties between Auburn and Clemson, I think there are some. I think the designer of the university,
they designed,
was the same person.
The same person, yeah. And even the colors were the same for a long time.
Yeah, exactly.
It's part of the reason why they changed it to purple, because it used to be orange and blue.
Yeah.
So they basically used to have similar colors.
Exactly.
And so they made purple the secondary color to kind of stand out a little bit.
And you guys had that main building on campus. What's y'all's?
Tillman.
Called? Yeah, Tillman is very similar to like a Sanford Hall or something on Auburn's campus.
Yeah. The campuses are very similar.
They are.
If you want to get somebody under Auburn's skin, you just say, "Oh, it's like Clemson's campus without a lake."
Yeah,
it's a joke used to say.
Yeah,
they don't like that.
Yeah,
but it is a great campus. But yeah, so it's just the ties that are also. And even thinking about like with Bobby Bowden, his son coached for us for a long time.
Of course,
growing up.
Danny Ford had some sort of. Didn't he have some sort of tie to Alabama?
I forget. So sorry, the Clemson fans, if there is one. Some of the stuff that comes to mind, other stuff I don't know as much.
Yeah.
But it's just when you think about all this stuff, it's like more similar than you think.
Yeah.
You know, and so, but that's cool. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah,
that.
no problem.
Yeah. So anyway, we thought it'd be fun to have each other on just to hear from these two perspectives. I feel like, Clemson, Alabama. The 2008 matchup was the first real matchup. I think they've played before, but that was the first like big matchup. And until we played y'all in the 2015 national championship, we hadn't really played a big game since then. And so we've had the 4 back and forth.
Yeah.
And to see how even it's been,
yes, it
was really cool.
For sure.
So because that first one was really heartbreaking. It was so cool to be there.
Yeah.
But to lose on a final. Be down one possession and be like, man, I don't know if we're going to get back here.
Of course. I remember thinking that.
I think we
Clemson
will.
Fans. Yeah.
I think we, it's like, okay, I think we will, but you just don't know.
You never know.
Especially when you have to reload. We had to reload a lot on defense. But then to go back and win the next year.
Exactly.
Like, this is amazing. And then we lost. And then we lost in the Sugar Bowl, obviously, which that ended up being a close game too. And then obviously Clemson wins last year. So it's as interesting, like you've had Alabama be the dominant team for this long stretch of time. In college football, that hasn't it's harder to do. I'd say it's one of the harder sports to do that. And then Clemson's kind of, because they've become this like 2-tiered team.
Yeah.
So it's fun to think about just from these perspectives. It's like you can honestly take bets of like, okay, who's going to win, Clemson, Alabama, or the field?
Yes, exactly. And that's what you hear on national media every week leading up to the season. That's what everybody's talking about. And it's almost, you heard for the past couple years about Bama fatigue or SEC fatigue. Outside of Clemson and Alabama fan bases, it's almost like you're starting to hear a Clemson, Alabama.
Oh, I hear
fatigue,
it. Yeah, I hear it too. Yeah.
But then you have some people who are saying like, no, this is what's best for the sport. The two best programs like going at it, and until somebody unseats them and says like, no, I'm one of the big boys now, then this is what's best for the sport. But I can see, obviously, for Clemson and Alabama fan bases, we are just loving it, But outside of that, I can see how other fan bases are getting annoyed.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things, like, I'm happy to see, like, parity in the sport.
Yes.
But honestly, when other teams have gone up, Ohio State, the past few years, they've been up there, and I would say, like, they're a team where I'm like, okay, like, if they're playing us, they can bring it, but they haven't been as good recently to make it there. But other than that, Georgia's been close, but they can't finish the deal. And I think they're going to be there. But it's honestly, until somebody else proves that they're on that next level, then it's just that's kind of the way it goes. So it'll be interesting. Because I know that's the huge thing right now is like, do you switch from a 4-team playoff to an 8-team playoff?
Yes.
And that's what I dove into earlier this year of like what would have it looked like.
Yes.
But then it's like you get to a point. I like the idea of an 8-team playoff because if we put the two on the pedestal, it's fun to have a playoff.
Yes.
I think it's the better system when you have these good teams, because a lot of times there's like 3 or 4 teams you could argue really deserve to be in the game.
Yes.
And it's almost like this pageant feel of like we don't get to play everybody. You're putting up your resume, and until they play somebody on that same level, you don't have anything to compare it to. You're trying to compare these two different schedules in two different parts of the country. And so with a 14 playoff, you get more of that feel of, okay, we're going to get between one of these 4 teams, you're going to have the best team
of course,
come out. You know, like Alabama, like if they lose a game, they lost a game. They lost when they won against Georgia. They were the 4 seed.
Yes,
but even still, like I mean, they were a really good team that year, and they deserved to win.
And in 14, it was the same way with Ohio State being the 4 seed. They beat Alabama in the first game, and then they went on to win it. You know, they were the best team.
They're the best team. So that's the part I like.
Yeah.
But also the part I don't like is you have 4 spots for a 5 power conference system.
Yes.
It just the two don't fit together.
Yeah.
And then of course then you also have Notre Dame who gets to be their own thing. But it just doesn't work with that. But then also you would argue is like, but the Pac-12 hasn't been as good. So like, okay, they don't deserve. So it kind of balances out, but 18 would be fun. And then it would be fun to see like a UCF get a shot.
Totally agree.
I think it'd be good for the sport. So honestly, I see it going to 8 just for the money's sake too.
Of course.
My opinion is if 8 would be the farthest you go.
Yeah.
You don't go farther than that. But I think 8 could be fun. It's going to stay 4 for a bit.
A while, yeah.
But I don't know. What do you think?
No, I agree. I've heard many different opinions, and honestly, there's been different arguments that have swayed my opinion. I think that I've been on that 8-team playoff thing for the past year at least, especially after this past playoff, like UCF being left out for the second year in a row. I was kind of like, oh man, it would be good if they got a shot, But then they did they got pretty handily beat by LSU in their bowl game, I believe, right?
Right,
so,
and they had lost their quarterback too.
That's true,
which makes a big difference.
Tough.
But
it's tough.
And so obviously, like they're not. Yeah, I guess it's just one of those things. Like, do you invite them to the party? But at the same time, though, it's like, at what point? We're talking about the national trying to define a national champion, and in college football, you're really talking about maybe 5 teams or 6 teams that have a legitimate shot at it every year. Not that other teams don't, but we're talking that kind of a number. So.
And at the same, I've said that, and then there'll be somebody who will make a wonderful argument that no, like 4 teams is what makes sense, and I'm like, well, yeah, you know what? They're right, 4 teams. It's tough for me to say because I haven't played college football, and I'm not out there getting crushed every week to say like what would it mean to add another week, or maybe what is the money side of it if we were to say like, well, the conference championships are like the first week or something like that,
Right.
It's hard to say from my side, so I guess I'm going to rely on the experts. But as a fan, I would love to see an 8-team playoff.
I think that would be fun. I mean, and the thing is too, so I've heard arguments too of like they're still trying to figure out how do you fit like the conference championship game within this system, and it doesn't always work.
Yeah,
because you could argue that like in the SEC the past couple of years, like last year Georgia was a great team, but because they lost, they got kicked out.
Yeah,
but then 2 years ago before they lost, but they were still in.
Yeah, or was Alabama lost? But
Alabama lost. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, you're right. And the thing is, and that's what I was thinking about college football or football in general, because the NFL is the same way, is so different than the other sports where they play multiple games for a round of the playoffs, right? College football and NFL, it's like you can rise to the occasion in one game. I mean, think about the 4th and 26 game. Georgia was killing Alabama in that first half, and then Tua comes in that second half, and it's just like they rise to the occasion and come back and win. It's like one half of football
can change everything.
Can totally change everything.
Yeah,
and
I think so. Trying to keep the value on the regular season, but still put value on like the teams that make it. And so it's an interesting. I could argue that you could just switch it to an 11-game regular season. Yeah. And take away one of the cupcake games that teams play.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Like just take away one of them. And I know it's a money thing.
Yeah, it is.
That was my thought, is if you went to an 8-team playoff, what you do is you take away one of those games and make the first round game a home game.
Oh yeah, that's
for
a great
that,
idea.
You don't have to figure out another system because like those stadiums are going to be open, unless they're high school championships, which you can figure out how to work that. Like that wouldn't be a problem. So there's things like that you can incentivize it, but so it'll be interesting to see. But also, of course, from our team's perspectives, we love the system that's in right now because you only have to play 2 more games, and we're always in the conversation. Yeah. So it's like. You don't want, like, when they've asked both Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney, they're like, no, why would we switch the system?
Exactly.
Because it's been working great for them. I mean, they don't.
Yeah, and I think it's just, especially from the fans' perspective, who want to see, like, oh, let's see what UCF would do if they got in there. Or, let's see what would have happened this past year if Georgia got yet another shot at Alabama after kind of letting that one slip through their hands in the SEC championship game, So from the fans, we want to see some invigorating stuff happen.
So there you go. So I think that's the big one this year. Like you could argue, Alabama, Clemson are the top ones to look at this year. It'll be interesting to see Oklahoma with Jalen Hurts as a quarterback.
Can't wait to see that.
That'll be interesting to see how they do and reload with that. They just keep churning out quarterbacks. So I think they're going to fit the offense for him. That'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see Justin Fields at Ohio State and that one, and Ryan Day and how they play. Other ones, Texas has been a hot team, a hot team to talk about. We'll see if they can pull it together. Georgia, obviously, this could be the year that they finally go over the top. Florida's been rising. Miami's the super dark horse where if Tate Martell becomes actually the quarterback that he was projected to be, and they could be a factor too. It just, there's so many different stories, which is why there's a show every week before games. For sure. They get to talk about all this stuff. But so as an Alabama fan going into this year, what are some things that you're kind of like looking for from a team perspective? Maybe like some different different positions that you're looking for, excited about, or looking for, okay, we need to make sure we improve this, and then like maybe some big games that you're be looking forward to, be like, okay, these are the key games on the schedule for us right now. For
sure. Obviously, I'm sure you've heard everyone talking about it schedule wise. Alabama has a pretty weak schedule this year, right? It's just that happens to be how it falls sometimes. But our out of conference game to start the season being Duke this year, where it's been maybe some tougher teams in the past years. And, we've got, of course, the cupcake games, New Mexico State, Southern Miss, Western Carolina. And then we get LSU at home this year and Tennessee at home. So those are kind of falling in our favor. But then we still have tough road games at A&M and Auburn. So a lot of people have been saying this year, like, hey, if Alabama loses one game, no chance that they make it to the playoff. Even if they go undefeated in the season and lose in the SEC championship game, which happened to Georgia last year, there's no chance they make it to the playoffs. Obviously, it depends on what happens to everyone else around. But
I would say if they went undefeated and lose to Georgia, I think they could still get in.
You think so?
Well, the thing with Georgia is they lost bad on the road at LSU last year too.
Oh yeah,
so that was their second loss.
Oh, okay, that's right.
I think the second loss makes it key.
Oh, for sure. 2 losses, there's no way you're making.
But it is hard. Like it's hard to not make it in.
But yeah, so this is probably the weakest out of conference schedule in a few years for Alabama. So that's going to definitely be a hurting thing. But then, schedule-wise, we go on the road to South Carolina this year. We all know what happened last time. Alabama went on the road to South Carolina in 2010. I was at that game. It was absolutely brutal. We were ranked number 1, undefeated, 5th game of the season or something like that. Riding pretty high. We just coming off a national championship in 2009.
Yeah, it was a big deal, yeah.
Thinking, what is this going to be with Nick Saban? This is going to be great. And then they just absolutely came out and smashed us in the mouth. It was shocking.
I still hear about this game all the time.
It was shocking. We had that was when we had Julio Jones, Mark Ingram. We had a star-studded offense, and they just came out and beat dookie out of us, you know?
Yeah,
it was crazy.
Yeah, in 2010, yeah, I mean, South Carolina had some strong. I mean, we were in the stretch where we were losing to South Carolina.
Exactly.
They had a few.
Stephen Garcia at quarterback.
Stephen Garcia.
Alshon Jeffries at wide receiver, which he was a stud, right?
Yeah, I mean, still playing.
Stephen Gilmore or is it Stephen Gilmore?
Or Stefan, I'm not.
Yeah, Gilmore. I don't know how you pronounce. Yeah, but
they have some
secondary. He was good.
They have some NFL players
for sure.
So that's a key game. I mean, obviously, I think that team was better than this team's going to be
for sure.
But it's always tough to go on the road, especially when you're not used to playing in a certain environment.
And you got Will Muschamp, who's kind of like, man, I need to win a big game. In order to keep my job. You got Jake Bentley, who's like, hey, I'm a senior here. I really haven't lived up to anything big yet that maybe I was projected to. So he's going to be hungry. I think they lost Deebo Samuel, right?
Yeah, he's gone.
He's gone. Thank goodness, right?
He's a senior,
he was a game-changing type player, and he's just not someone you ever want to play against necessarily.
No. But if you look at this, they only have 4 road games. Wow.
Yeah.
They only have 4 true road games. I mean, the Duke game is a neutral site.
Correct.
And
Alabama tends to play in the neutral site game every year.
Yeah, so they do open it.
We do normally only have 4 true road games.
Yeah, so I think that's the key ones. If I was looking at the schedule, I would say if I was going to rank these of like just the toughest games, or most opportunity for Alabama just to slip up, I would say if Texas A&M is playing like they are capable of playing, and they start off the season strong. That's a big one for Clemson too. Clemson hasn't at home. Texas A&M they have a tough schedule.
Yeah, I think South Carolina, right?
And South Carolina and Georgia, I think too.
Yeah,
it's pretty. And then obviously Auburn is a big one.
Always, you just never know.
It's a rivalry game. It's just how it goes. I mean, even Clemson, they win last year, but they gave up 35 points to South Carolina.
Yeah,
you just throw records out the window.
In my lifetime, there have just been some utterly shocking Alabama-Auburn games. When in 2010, I went to the Alabama-Auburn game at Alabama. Auburn comes in with Cam Newton, undefeated. We're looking for a chance to, destroy their BCS national championship hopes.
Right.
We're up 24-0.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Or maybe it was 24-3. I looked at my friend David, who was with me, and I was just like, guys, it's not enough. It's not enough. Cam Newton is the type of player.
You just didn't.
I mean, you needed to be up by 40 points. It's like when we were crushing Oklahoma with Kyler Murray this past year in the playoff. You're up by 28 points, and you're like, it's not enough. Kyler Murray can do that. He can come back.
Yeah,
and he started to. But in 2010 against Auburn, that was the same way. And it's like that every year. You just never know.
He might have been the most dominating opposing player that I've seen in a season.
Sure.
Because Clemson played him too. He was still getting used to the offense. But, just seeing one player for 1 year, it was crazy.
Yes.
Just flying through people
exactly.
in the SEC.
Yes. Truly like Superman, right? Auburn is always a tough game, and it's at Auburn, which is always a tough place to play at Jordan-Hare Stadium. So, and then everybody's saying LSU. LSU, they're ranked top 10 this year. They're coming to Alabama, which is good for us. But I just don't know at quarterback, man.
Here's the thing: it's for LSU, they have a strong defense, but it's just as the saying goes, same church, different pew.
Yeah,
it's meaning it's. Same team, different year.
Yeah.
And it's just okay, offensively, just don't know.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's Alabama just knows, okay, they're going to run the ball a lot.
Yeah.
They have a strong defense, but we have to put up 20-something on points and just really lock them down on defense.
Exactly.
And they've had these tools, but they've never been able to, fully recently get that all together. So LSU, yeah, they could be good with that. I think they brought in a new quarterback, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I think that's a big one.
Yeah, for sure. So, that's the ones that I'm thinking about: LSU, Auburn, Texas A&M.
Okay.
What about Clemson?
Clemson? Let's see. I'm just replaying up their schedule. Our opening night is Georgia Tech. Yeah. The opening night of the ACC network
on Thursday, right?
Competing with the SEC network.
Yeah.
I've laughed with some other people. They're like, are you sure we get the ACC network? Because I have the extra one, but I was like, are we sure we have this? Georgia Tech for us was always that game growing up too. it was a purple out game.
Yep.
We always wear purple. We don't do it anymore like that, but they were always a tough place to play. You're like, man, I'm so glad we don't have to play the option anymore.
Yeah.
For Clemson, because Georgia Tech was our like cross-divisional rival. You have to play them every year. So you have to play the option every year.
Yeah.
And it's just such a different offense. So I'm so glad we don't have to play that anymore. I mean, we had it. Brent Venables, our defensive coordinator, had it, I feel like, on lockdown to be able to show them how to defeat it. But
wait, so did they've changed from the option offense?
Yeah, because they let
Paul
Johnson. He was retired, but it was one of those, like, he retired, but it was like a mutual.
Really?
Yeah. So and then they brought in Jeff Collins from Temple, I believe.
Wow.
So they're going to be in a rebuilding mode for the next couple of years because
this happened at the end of last season.
End of last season.
Wow, I didn't even know that. See, that's how far from the ACC following every day that I am.
Well, sure, and it's just it's what you're focused on. You know, like, I don't know. You kind of tend to, like, as a fan of, when you're a fan of a big school, you tend to follow the schools that you end up playing every year.
Exactly. Yeah.
So but yeah, they're changing their offense. It's probably gonna be more of a spread.
That's going to be shocking. I mean, I like,
it's
my entire adult life, I've just thought of Georgia Tech as the triple option offense.
Mm-hmm. You know? So one of the first big games was maybe, what was it? 07, 08? When was that? We had one of our first college game days. We were both ranked in the top 15.
Yeah.
Purple. It was CJ Spiller's freshman year. We had James Davis and CJ Spiller.
Yeah.
And we had to play Calvin Johnson in Georgia Tech. Calvin Johnson, he convinced Calvin Johnson to stay because that was the first year of Paul Johnson's switching to the triple option. Yeah. And so, but he convinced him to stay and then they just made this. There was a triple option and this big threat down the field. Exactly. And we held him to, like, no catches, and it was this huge game. And then Spiller has, like, 2 long touchdowns. Yeah. And it was like one of our first big, like, man, we beat this ranked team. So we play them. So they're going to be in rebuilding mode for a couple years. But that's what they're kind of looking for. And then we play A&M at home, which that was a scare for us on the road last year. But granted, what was hard about last year's A&M, we just didn't have any tape on them.
Of course. And there was the whole Kelly Bryant.
And the Kelly Bryant and that little dance that they were trying to do. And now that it's Trevor's team,
yes,
I think it's a totally different offense. You have these like weapons that are more used to it. I think I think my prediction is Clemson will probably win by like 2 touchdowns.
You think so?
Yeah, I think it'll be like we'll pull away.
Of course.
When you play a Jimbo Fisher-led team, he's one of the best play callers I've seen. I don't love always the culture he brings in, but he's a great coach. I mean, he just knows how to make the pieces he makes work. Mm-hmm. And so I think it'll be a close game. So that first little stretch, and then for us at Syracuse, they're going to be down. But we lost to them 2 years ago.
Yeah, but they had Eric Dungy, quarterback, who was like, I mean, he was a stud, right? He was a leader who could lead a team to beat a Clemson.
No, he's really good. And last year, and then when we lost 2 years ago, we had to go on a Friday night.
Yeah, I remember.
Which is it was trying to get eyes on the ACC, which I get. But it just feels, you're like, man, we've had to do that, and we had to do Boston College a couple years ago too. Yeah. On the road on a Friday night up north. Yeah. It just was like, man, they're really trying to get eyeballs up here, which I get, but that's just tough. So I think if we get those, I think we'll get through those, but those will be tough ones. Once we get through that, I think it'll be more of an easier slate for us because Florida State's down, Louisville's down. Those would be big ones. And then obviously having to go at South Carolina this year will be tough. Sure. Especially when it's like Jake Bentley's senior night. Whenever you go on the road for a rivalry game, it's going to be tough. Yeah. So I say those are probably our big. So it's like a heavy front load. And then NC State's always a tough one on the road. Yeah. Oh, that one's always a fun game. Yeah. But they're reloading too. Yeah. So there's a lot of, I feel like for both Clemson and Alabama, it's a year of like, okay, focusing on like little details every week and not taking your opponent for granted. Yeah. Because any of these teams can really beat you. Sure. And they're gonna take their best shot. Yeah, of course. From this position because it's like it's the big circle game for them. Yeah. We play Clemson at home. We play Alabama at home. Like that's a big game. And
here's what's tough for me as a fan when it comes to y'all's schedule is like. Every year before the past couple of years, you knew that the Clemson-Florida State game was going to be an awesome game, right? It was going to be a big deal. The game. Yeah. And then now this year, it's like, Florida State's projected to finish pretty low in your conference, which is shocking.
Well, that's part of the thing is it really dropped off the last couple years.
Yeah.
They stopped recruiting. Well, they didn't really have the offensive line play. They've missed on a couple quarterbacks. And then with Jimbo Fisher leaving, they just had, then they're really having to just gut the program and start over. And so I think they will be up there. Florida State's too good of a history to not be back.
Oh, of course.
It just will take them a little bit, I think. Louisville, I think they have a tough time recruiting sometimes. Like they get it, but then they'll be in a cycle. They'll probably be good in a little bit, but it'll take them longer, I think. When you look at these, I think, and that's what I was saying, Miami, if Miami can hit and everything come together, they should be, they have the highest ceiling of all those other division teams. Mm-hmm. Virginia's projected to be the team.
Virginia.
Which is like surprising when you think about it, but they have probably the second best quarterback, Bryce Perkins.
Yeah.
He's like a run first kind of quarterback. I would compare him to like a Nick Marshall.
Okay.
From Auburn.
Yeah.
And Marshall was quicker, but it's that type of style of like lots of runs and with some like key passes.
Yes.
That's at least for me, that's where we haven't played them in a while, but that's the feeling he gets. So anyway, those are probably some key things, and that's the hard part with some of this is that you try as your best to schedule games in advance, but then if your conference is down, you play with who's on your schedule and you just do the best you can.
Yeah.
But traditionally, Florida State was our big one. NC State's a big one. And you schedule A&M far in advance, which is fun. But Clemson's got some fun ones coming up. We play Notre Dame next year on the road, which that will be fun.
Yes.
We scheduled a home and home again with Georgia, a home and home with LSU.
Okay.
So there's some ones.
Whoa, when's the home and home with Georgia and LSU?
I think it's like early 20s. I'd have to look it up.
I remember it was so funny because Alabama scheduled a home and home with Oklahoma, but it was for like 2030 or something like that. They
scheduled them so far in advance.
It was so funny. People were joking last year when that came out about what age they would be at that time. And so, someone my age, you're thinking like, oh, I'm going to be, 43 years old at that time.
I know.
So
I know.
It's pretty funny how early out they have to schedule those things.
Yeah. So I'd say that's the biggest thing. And then it's not wanting a letdown from the previous year. Because there's a lot of new. That's the big thing for Clemson. There's just a lot of new, especially on the defense. Like there's people who have the capability of stepping up, but the defensive line's going to be new. Luckily, Clemson has a lot of players. Like they try to play a lot of players to give them experience to be able to step up. But I would say that's a big one. We switched Darion Kendrick, who was a freshman wide receiver and returner. He has now become he's projected as a starting cornerback. Because he's quick and we've had a lot of receivers coming up. So there's people like that. Linebackers going to be a big position for us to look at. We had like Shaq Smith transfer to Maryland, which is a little shocking because he was going to get some more playing time.
Yeah.
So there's probably more there. But we've had a couple of transfers, which has been interesting. But I think projected-wise, everything should kind of move up to where these guys get opportunities. But then again, it's just like you want those guys to move up. And so you just don't know until they play.
Yeah, just looking through, because you would ask about, what are you thinking about the team? How's your feeling about like the roster and stuff like that with Alabama? There's a lot of questions out there this year. I mean, think about the past 2 seasons we've played knowing that our second string quarterback was going to be a strong quarterback, whether it was Tua's freshman year when Jalen was the starter. We knew that we had a pretty solid freshman quarterback as a backup. And then last year, knowing that you have Jalen Hurts as a backup, who was a 26-2 as a starter, I mean, you always had this good feeling about who your backup is.
We'll be okay. Yeah.
Now this year, we're going to have Tua, obviously, and then the backup is Mac see, it's Mac Jones, I think, is the backup, and then Paul Tyson is listed along with Talia as the third string. So you have two freshmen coming in with zero experience, although they're both projected to be pretty decent players, and then you have Mac, who didn't get a ton of snaps last season because Jalen and Tua.
It's hard to be in the third string behind those other two guys.
I was at the Mississippi State game last year, and Mac got to go in, and Mississippi State had an NFL defensive line running at him last year. He felt pretty overwhelmed, it looked like, at the moment, and so you just wonder, like, man, how's he going to perform this year? Once he's in the backup role, so he'll be getting more mop-up duty stuff, and depending on Tua's health, he may have to go in some pretty critical situations, and so that'll be a big difference. Like we talked about a little earlier, the running back situation. Last year, you think about, you had Damian Harris, Josh Jacobs, and Najee Harris. 3 studs that you knew of.
You just go and load them and see who's the hot hand.
Exactly. You could just, any one of those guys were interchangeable in the games. And then Brian Robinson would come in, and at the end of games, he would just be bowling ball. Let's run out the clock. Let's get him some snaps. But this year, you've got Najee, he's your number one. He has the most experience. And then after that, it's kind of, you got Brian Robinson, who has cleanup snaps. Then Trey Sanders, who's a freshman, and honestly, Jerome Ford is listed as third string. I don't actually really know him much about him, so that's going to be totally different than the past years. We're obviously solid at wide receiver. This is the best Alabama stretch has been at wide receiver in my lifetime.
You would say over some different. We've had
top wide receivers. You've always
across the board.
You've had your Julio, you had your Amari Cooper, you had your Calvin Ridley, and even during that time, let's think about when Amari was there. You still had some awesome supporting cast, Marquise Mays being one that comes to mind. You've always had good slot receivers to go along with those big wideouts. But this core of receivers and how good they are, Jerry Jeudy is your number one. He's a stud. He's going to be a first-round draft pick. Yeah. But the other guys are so interchangeable. Henry Ruggs, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, they're all killers at wide receivers. So this wide receiver core is going to be great. Then we obviously lost 2 huge offensive linemen last year in Ross Pierschbacher and Jonah Williams. They're going to be big holes to fill. But I feel like our linemen on the defense and offensive side tend to reload and do a really good job when they fill
teams.
in.
Yeah, those two especially, for both teams, they just reload. I think that's the reload.
Exactly.
You just who's next.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So on the defensive side, I'm really interested to see what we look like in the secondary. We always have good backups there, but to be honest, we had 2 guys leave the program last year to go to the draft who I wasn't expecting they would. Yeah. I think a lot of people were surprised. And then they actually didn't get drafted until late rounds, if at all. I think one of them didn't even get drafted. So we'll be interested to see how we look like in the secondary next year. So those questions kind of make you feel like, okay, what's the season going to feel like? It's going to be pretty different. We'll see how we do on defense, especially.
Yeah, I think that is interesting. I think the defenses for both teams are the things that you're wanting to see of who's going to step up to be these top players next year, and to kind of see who stands out with that. Because I'm even looking, because offenses definitely, I would say, on paper are stronger for Clemson, our stronger position group.
Yeah.
Because you have, the hard part is you do lose a Tavion Feaster, who is our backup running back, which, we have guys to roll, but it's some younger freshmen. Yeah. And to where before it was okay, Travis Etienne was the starter and he could take some more, but then Tavion could give him a breather and give some good space. And then you have Lynn J. Dixon, who is more of our burner. So you have to bring him in when the defense is tired and he gets just to gash people. Yeah. And now he's going to try to be the second position. But other than that, we have, Justin Ross and T. Higgins, our starters, and Amari Rogers. He's hurt right now, but he should be back for most of the season at least. That's probably our big ones. But then secondary is the bigger game. So if you were going to play Clemson, Alabama again right now, I think it would be like a 48 to 35.
Yeah, throw it over the top.
It really would be like the first game. It'd just be like long touchdowns, just high flying offense.
Exactly.
I think. Now the defense can make plays, but that's just the strengths of the teams. Right now. So yeah, there you go. I'm trying to think of other positions. Our big one too. We lose Mitch Hyatt, who is a 4-year starter at left tackle. He's a 5-star who literally started every game of his career. We have Jackson Carman, who is supposed to come in. He's a great tackle, but it's just different when you haven't played. Especially on offensive line when you're trying to protect the blind side. That's probably the big one on the offensive line. Xavier Thomas is supposed to be really good. I mean, he was a great freshman, but as he moves up into that, and then linebacker is probably our most key position because we only have a few people listed to see. So it'll be fun to see, and it's fun to see like young guys get to step up and see how the team kind of shakes out, because every team has a different little feel to it. Which is, I think, the fun part about the storyline of college football is that every team has its like own little story you kind of follow. You kind of see like, okay, who's starting to play more? What's the feel of the team? Like what are the things they're focusing on? Or how the play calling even changes.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's fun to have these first big games, but then you kind of play a little bit safer.
Speaking of play calling, that's another thing about Alabama that, we're not as sure of this year. We got Sarkisian coming in again, right? So he was the offensive coordinator for one game after Lane Kiffin left.
Right.
And then he had been signed but decided to go to the Falcons. Now he's back. He's back as offensive coordinator.
His storyline is just like all over the place.
Yeah, he really is. West Coast to East Coast, man.
West Coast to East Coast, yeah.
Let's see how he does. I hope that it's one of those stories where you're like, man, he just turned out to be a great guy, a great coach. And then on the defense side, we got rid of last year. We had co-defensive coordinators, and then we changed up this year. We're only going to have the one guy. I actually can't even think of his name right now. But we'll see how the defense and offensive coordinating goes this year. We really have lost out from guys like Jeremy Pruitt leaving a couple years ago, and Kirby Smart, who was there for the longest tenured time with Saban as a coordinator. It was inevitable that he was going to go be a head coach, and when Georgia, his alma mater, came calling, obviously that's what he'd been waiting on, and so it makes sense when you take that. But in recent years, with such turnover at offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, it makes you kind of long for those days where you had a guy who was around for a long time, kind of like Brent Venables at Clemson. You're just like, man, I'm kind of jealous that he's been there for so long.
We're very lucky to have him.
As an Alabama fan, you're like, man, I wish Brent Venables would go take a head coaching job somewhere.
I know he's been offered. Honestly, it's just one has kind of said that he just enjoys it right now. It's not that he couldn't. He just his sons are now on the team. I know he didn't want to leave when they were playing high school ball. Like the fact he gets to go watch them and be on this, like, be part of this great thing. Clemson's just been, I think it's been nice to have that consistency. Not have to worry about that as much. I know there was some talk about one of our offensive coordinators potentially leaving, but that's been a nice thing to have that consistently. And I think but also shows like how much people value like Alabama's coordinators, that they go and pick them up to be coaches. Yeah. So I think both of them can work. It's just they're different. Yeah. It's different styles. And so it's interesting to see that the two styles both work, but just how it kind of fixes itself out. Yeah.
And this one thing that I haven't heard much media buzz about is, how the players react to these coaches, how they feel around them. For instance, you always heard about how Jeremy Pruitt was a player's coach, for instance. Like, the players love Jeremy Pruitt. Same thing with Mike Locksley last year on the offensive side. I mean, he's a player's coach, and the players loved him, and so with these new guys, Sarkisian, and on the defense side, I just don't know, what does the players feel for them, and how do they how do they jive and stuff like that.
I think from an outsider's perspective, that's the I think one of the biggest keys for Alabama is to consistently have a coordinator or two that the players feel like is their guy.
Yeah.
And it's not that Saban's not. Saban just feels more of like
he's a business guy.
He's more the business CEO feeling of like I love you, but I love you in the sense of like I'm going to make you better. I'm going to be hard on you.
Yeah.
Like, or I'm going to make you into the best player that you want to be. Like, you want to get to the NFL. I'm going to show you how to get there. This is the place for you to do it, and this is our system.
Of course.
Versus where Dabo's more of the like goofy dad feeling. It's just different, you know. Versus
Dabo
like he can be hard too, but it's a more of the I love you like.
He seems like the guy that's like, hey man, you want to go to the trampoline park after practice? You know. Top guy, Dabo. Like, obviously, they wouldn't go to trampoline park and tear all their ACLs, but
that'd be probably like a bad group outing.
Exactly. Yeah, no, he seems like that. You get to see some cool videos of Saban taking guys out on his boat on the lake and stuff too. That's the fun stuff you like to see out of your coaching players. You know,
and I think it's there. It's more of the. I think what's been fun is to see that doesn't have to just be one style.
Yeah.
You know, because I know a lot of people were trying to emulate the Saban style because he had been winning for so long.
Yeah.
But if it's like not your personality, like you don't need to do. You know, course, like I think just fitting. It's the best way of leading these guys to become young men in society first. You know, because if such a few percentage actually make the NFL and then like do well.
Yeah.
So you're really trying to teach them how to become young men and how to like grow through this for a game, but also how to do it in life. And so whether that's like through the tough love style or versus like the kind of goofy like we're gonna have fun, but also like we're gonna be serious too. You know, whatever more the style is, I think that's the big key.
No, you're right. And I mean, I love the way that Dabo is with his guys. I mean, it just. You can appreciate it from an outsider's perspective. So I like that a lot. Even being an Alabama fan and, you know, seeing we've got the Saban style. You guys have the Dabo style. I've so appreciated how Dabo has developed his own. I mean, he's just his own person as a coach. And as a fan from another school, I really appreciate it as well, you know. So it kind of makes you think about like the Jim Harbaugh style of what things he does with his players. You know, you hear about in the off season how they go like overseas trips and stuff. I'm not in that world, obviously, being from the South, so I don't hear the buzz around Michigan or anything like that. But I wonder, you know, what their perspective is there of how he is with the players. Is he more of a Dabo type guy, or is he more of a business CEO Saban type guy?
I would say he's probably a little bit of in the middle. But like if you were going to place the two, like Urban Meyer, who did just leave, he was probably more the Saban style.
Yeah.
And Harbaugh is more of the players coach type of feel, which works. But like if you don't win, then it's like it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
You know, and it doesn't matter. But I know because I also grew up a Michigan fan, and having until they just need to beat Ohio State.
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing for them. Until they actually win and like win convincingly, you know, they just prove that they're on the same level again.
For sure.
All that stuff's fun.
That game last year was brutal. Ohio State absolutely destroyed them.
I think it was from a couple years ago when they lost on that fourth down in overtime. You know, like that was the one I think that really hurt them. But they're always talked about as a big one, but they're one of those schools again. You're like, until they go up and prove it, you know, like you're going to keep the same people in there. So it'd be fun to see some different schools in there. But that's, So, but he's a fun one. So there you go. That's we're excited about this college football season. It's starting to get that feel. Even this week has been the lower temperatures. You're like, man, it's like
you
here we go.
Smell that fresh cut burnt grass, right? That's what I was thinking about. You're in the South. The grass has been absolutely baked by the sun. It gets that fresh cut feeling and smell, and it makes me think of two-a-days in high school. You're like, all right, it's about to be football season. You know, we're about to get out there and get ready.
There's something special about it, and it's just hard to. There's just something. There's not anything else quite like it, and it's just cool to see like how much it. It's crazy how much it just becomes a part of your life, or just your everyday.
Yeah.
just thinking about, you hear, like, you smell grills going up.
Oh, yeah.
You just get the feel of that's one of my favorite parts of game days. It's the atmosphere.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
the bands playing. It's the smell of the field. Like for Clemson, it's like orange is not a color you see naturally all the time.
Yeah.
And then you would come up you just walk through all these trees, and then you just come up over the hill, and then you just see just a sea of orange.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just, there's nothing quite like, I mean, I'm sure with Alabama it's similar, but there's just nothing that's quite like a game day at home.
I totally agree.
It's different.
It is.
And not that the NFL is not fun, but it's a different feeling of just like watching like your team that you've grown up watching, and they're there because they're playing for their school.
Yep.
I still like the idea of them not having to play for money.
Yeah, me too.
I mean,
me too. I know that's a hot topic right now.
I want them to get what they're worth, but I like when money. I still would love for money not to be as. I mean, just there to be just a purity still to it, and I think that's the part that's really fun. Like you've seen like dads showing their sons the game, or all the different cheers, or seeing the band, being a part of it. All the traditions. Yeah. Like, it's just fun. Like, seeing guys run down the hill for us, or
the Walk of Champions at Alabama, which is become a tradition.
Like Tiger Walk. Yeah, there's just something different about it. And I'm excited. I mean, the more we talk about this, the more I'm ready for the season. We're under a month away.
I saw the countdown earlier. 35 days till Alabama kicks off. 35 days. We're so close, Yeah. So it's super exciting.
So there you go. Any final thoughts, Barrett, you wanted to share with the people?
No. I mean, I feel like there's so many topics we could talk about. Players getting paid, etc. There's so many things that are surrounding right now. The buzz topics, the hot takes and stuff that we could talk about.
Paul Feinbaum. He could be a whole show of himself.
Exactly.
Just from different perspectives.
Yeah, man. I'm just really excited for college football. I'm really excited to see if that Clemson Alabama narrative carries out this year. Who knows? We may end up being all surprised. Clemson Alabama could lose a game earlier, and then we're talking about Texas Oklahoma the whole year. I think definitely one of the biggest storylines I'm looking forward to this year, and I'm sure you can relate. We both have quarterbacks that have gone to different schools this year, and I know from an Alabama fan's perspective, we want to see Jalen Hurts do really well. We all love Jalen and think that he's an awesome guy, so I'd love to see him do really well at Oklahoma. Not sure how Clemson fans feel about Kelly. I think
some fans are still upset.
Yeah,
and which makes sense. For me personally, I would love to see him do. I wish him doing well. Yeah. I get where he's coming from.
Yeah,
and honestly, it's like he wants to make the NFL.
Exactly,
and which is understandable. Yeah, and he's a good guy.
His departure was a little bit different than Jalen's.
It was. I think it was a little bit more of a rash decision.
Yeah.
But I mean, for most fans I talk to, they really wish him the best. And I think they're going to tune into Missouri, wish them to do well. If we played them, we want to kick their butt.
Of course.
But like you wish him the best, and like with Tavian too, like Feaster, don't love him to go if he wants to go to South Carolina, but you wish those guys well.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is like there's not animosity. Because they're also college kids, and you just want them to do well and want them to be successful. So it's fun to see those kind of storylines.
Yeah, I agree.
There's just so many of those types of little things that'll be really interesting. Like the Heisman, I think will be really interesting too, and all that kind of stuff. But so there you go. Well, Barrett, thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me, Nate.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, there's so much stuff to talk about. So. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening and for tuning in. And remember, please share and subscribe the podcast. Let your sports crazy fans know about the podcast. Share what you like, what you didn't like. Do you think it'll be another Alabama-Clemson matchup again in the national title? Do you think a different team will be up there? Who do you think has the better shot? Do you think Clemson can repeat? Do you think Alabama really will come back and get the revenge tour on? So there's so many things to talk about. So thanks for tuning in. But for now, we're signing off.